All
Recording.
right,
Start
so we're
stream.
starting the broadcast.
Yep,
And
so
do you have
it's
to
starting.
double check to see if we're live?
And right now it's a black screen, but it is live.
Okay. Okay. Just wanted to confirm that first.
Yeah. Oh, you obviously can't look at it on your phone.
Right, right. I can't see it through doing it
Okay, we're
remotely.
live. We're
Okay, so we're
live.
live. All right,
Yep.
we are live, everyone. This is the Doug and Fur Show. My name is Doug Petrozelli. This is my partner in truth.
Fernando.
And today we're doing things a little bit differently. We are broadcasting remotely. Fernando is in the studio that we're typically in. I am in a makeshift studio. We're not typically going to do things this
Well,
way,
I'm in
but
the
there was
office.
some.
Huh.
We typically like to do things where we're together, but this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode. But we wanted to have a couple things that were on our hearts and on our minds that we've studied, we brought together. But I just want you to open that up for.
Yeah, so like Doug said, this is like a little impromptu thing that we decided to throw. Normally we do it every 2 weeks, but we're testing something out. We had something we wanted to share, and I think this sets a good precedent because we'll be able to do this kind of thing just kind of off the fly, off the cuff, whenever we feel like talking about something important, and we can both be in our own homes and we can get more content out there, especially something like this where we just want to talk about something quickly, something we feel is important. So. So yeah, oh, by the way, I'm in my office, not my studio, so all the Disney stuff in the back is my wife's, so I apologize. Or if you love Disney, then I don't apologize.
Well, I do love Disney, so you don't have to apologize for me.
Okay, so today I wanted to talk about vaccination requirements and the idea that the government or other entities will force you to get vaccines. I'm seeing that idea come around more and more often. I'm seeing that being portrayed and being pushed for by some people. Some people are all for it. Hey, yeah, let's force people to get vaccinated. We want everyone to be vaccinated. And I
Right,
just wanted
right.
to share my thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, well, how about we do this? How about I play devil's advocate for both sides?
Oh, it's
So,
beautiful.
so let's just go for the pro-vaccine route, and let's talk a little bit about that. So, pro-vaccine,
Well, I
I
just
think
wanted
it's a.
I
Go
wanted to
ahead.
say why I got the inspiration to do this video.
Okay.
So I'm on Snapchat and then I scroll down and there's like a discover section and I always see I like to watch the liberal podcasts just because I want to know how they think and I want to know where they're coming from. So some of them are good and I always watch one that always triggers me. It's Pod Save America.
All
Um,
right.
yeah. So
Trigger
let me switch
right.
it here. Pod Save America. And sometimes they say things that are they have a point or whatever. So it's these people right here. Um, I don't know if you can see them, but yeah, so it's them. Um, so sometimes they say some things that have some good points, but at other times I don't I don't know if it's ignorance because they have their statistics. It's just a mindset. It's a way of thinking
Right.
that I just don't understand. I don't get where
Right.
they're coming from. And sometimes I think it's wrong, it's immoral, and I think that the way they think that the reason they think that way is because of fundamentally different belief systems. Like their core of what they think is moral and immoral is just different. It's
Right.
fundamentally different, and I don't know that that can be explained away, but we can try. That's what we're here to do, to just discuss and have open debate. So,
Right.
go ahead and start with Devil's Advocate.
Right. All right. So let's start with devil's advocate. I want to talk about from the perspective of pro-vaccine. We think people should be forced to do it, and why do I think it? And this is not my perspective, but I'm just playing devil's advocate. Why would someone think that the arguments for why someone thinks that the government should, by force, demand and force people to get vaccines? Um, I guess one of the perspectives that I've heard, arguments that I've heard, is say, well, we need to stop this spread, and if people won't get the vaccine, this virus is going to be around forever, and we're going to have to deal with it forever. And if we really care about people's health, there's people who just don't know any better, and they need to be forced and be told what to do.
Okay, so that's kind of the argument that was coming from Pod Save America, but it seems like so it's kind of a response video to that. It seems like they were saying hey, enough with I mean they even used some expletives. They were saying enough with all this, whatever, we're tired of this. This pandemic needs to go away, and these people that aren't getting vaccinated aren't smart enough to do it, and they're dumb, and they don't, it's all conspiracy, and they're always blaming everything on the Republican Party, and it's just absurd. So
Or the Democratic Party, you mean?
No, they are always blaming everything on the Republican
Oh, God
Party.
Save America.
Yeah, they say
Sorry, sorry.
Republicans are idiots and whatever, and they
Right,
are
right,
always
right.
making
Okay.
fun of Republicans, um, which is not something that we do here. We don't make fun of parties and people's beliefs because we're trying to have open discussion. I'm not going to make fun of what you believe in, you know. So yeah, so it seemed like that was the side they were coming from, and it's I just think forcing people to be vaccinated, or basically saying like, even if it's not like government employees coming to your house and giving you the vaccine, but basically saying
Right,
you can't do anything. You can't go to the store, you can't go to the market, you can't go to
right,
events, you can't do anything. You can't have a job unless you're vaccinated. That's basically being forced into it because you need a job to
right,
live, obviously. You need to buy
right.
groceries. So that
Was
idea,
essentially taking away your freedoms,
yeah,
you know.
that idea that you need to be vaccinated in order to live basically is immoral in my opinion
Right,
because you're forcing someone to do something that they don't want to do, and you say it's for public health, but I don't think it is because if it were for public health, if you want to be healthy, then go ahead and get vaccinated.
right,
Why force me to do it? You know, people that are getting the disease now that are unvaccinated is by their choice. And if you don't want to be in that position, then just go and get vaccinated.
right,
So
right,
the hospitals aren't being overwhelmed, and if these people want to get the disease and because they don't want to get vaccinated, that's on them. And it's
right,
wrong to force them to do it. That's reason number one why I think it's immoral. But reason number two why I think it's immoral, and this is the bigger reason, honestly, in my opinion, is because there is a legitimate fear of the vaccine. And I'm not
right,
talking about a fear, like I know everyone's coming out with research and saying it's safe. I get that. The fear in some cases is conspiracy based and it's unfounded, and they're just listening
right,
to too much fake news or whatever. I mean, sometimes they'll blame it on
right,
Tucker
right,
Carlson or whatever, but that's not the kind of fear I'm talking about. I'm talking about a more educated fear of the unknown. And
right,
there's always been an unknown when it comes to science. And this generation always thinks it knows more than the last because it does.
right,
Our generation is more advanced in science than the previous generation. But they were also more advanced than the previous generation, and 100 years from now, they're going to be more advanced than us. And we always think we
right.
know everything. We think in this current generation, it's like, hey, we know what we're talking about. We know all of the possible X, Y, and Z variables, and we have that under control, and it's safe, right? So
Right,
that's the mindset we're coming at it with, but we don't. So I was
right,
recently I
right.
was recently looking at something. I don't know if you've heard of the radium girls. Have you heard of them?
I have not.
Okay, so in the early 1900s, radium was discovered, and it had a glow in the dark property. So businessmen were like, "Oh, this is great." So they hired a bunch of young girls to start painting onto the watch faces, like for wristwatches, to paint with the radium paint.
Right,
And so it would glow nice and whatever, and they were encouraged to lick the paintbrushes so that they can get a fine point, right? And they didn't know that radium was radioactive. I don't even think they knew much about radioactive properties at the time. It wasn't as well known as it is today, obviously.
right.
And long story short, many of them died horrible, slow, painful deaths. Um, and that's just one example.
Sounds
That's real.
terrible.
Yeah, yeah, it's terrible. And it's because they didn't know. And at the
Right,
time, I'm sure they thought they knew everything, but they didn't
right,
know about that. And
right,
and then years later, you have lead, right? Lead is in everything. Lead is in paint. Lead was in your
right,
gasoline, and you're pumping out poisonous lead all over the atmosphere and everywhere, and people are now getting
right,
lead poisoning. And I'm sure at the time they didn't know, right?
right. They
And
thought they were
that's
doing everything just fine.
exactly, and that's less. That was like 70 years ago, as opposed to the Radium Girls, which was like what over 100 years ago.
Right.
And even the
Well, I
most
think I
recent.
think lead-based paints just got outlawed in like the 70s. I think that's only like 50 years ago, if not less.
Yeah, yeah, and then the whole lead movement I think started in the 50s. So, but even still, you could argue that was a long time ago. We don't know as much. We know a lot more now than we did back then.
Right,
And well,
right,
what about benzene? The chemical that was in sunscreen that was I mean, I think we've known about it for a while, but this is way more recent. That it was
right,
just shown to cause cancer, and people are applying
right,
this onto their skin to protect themselves from the sun.
right. Putting
To
on their kids and everything
yeah, to protect themselves
from
from the
skin
sun for
cancer.
skin cancer, and it's giving it because it has a hazardous chemical. And I think that the same concept applies to the vaccine, right? Currently, with the knowledge we have, it's safe.
Right,
With the people we've tested on, it's safe. And great. It's awesome. It's a miracle. It's very effective and it's very good at what it does. And I think that's great. And I'm not bashing that. And I just want to reiterate that I don't think that the vaccine is unsafe. I just don't know what possible side effects could be discovered in the future that we don't know about now. Right now, we
Right.
know a ton of science, but like, I don't know. Back then, they didn't know as much about radiation. Now we don't know that much about, I don't know, dark energy. Just throwing something out there. Well, what if
Right.
this vaccine has a certain chemical which does something with dark energy? I don't know. I'm just throwing out random
Right.
things. But what I'm saying is that there are things that we don't know now, which we will know in the future. And 100 years from now, they're going to be like, oh, they didn't know. They're stupid or whatever.
Right.
So
So
I'm
let me make sure I'm wrapping my mind around this. So basically, you're saying we don't know what this vaccine can do, and if this vaccine is, if you find yourself in the risk, everything we do is a risk assessment. We drive our
exactly.
car, we're taking a risk assessment. If we're finding ourselves like we're not in a vulnerable population, which I think you said yesterday on the show,
Yeah.
our people between the ages of I think what did you say 20 and 40 is a minuscule number. I mean, it's statistically zero.
Yeah.
What was like 0.0002 or something chance of us dying. It's a risk assessment. So you are not anti-vaccine. It's just not worth it for the unknown variables that could present itself in the future. You'll take the risk of getting sick.
Exactly. So that's what it is. This video, or sorry, this podcast is by no means telling you to be scared of the vaccine or to not
Right.
get vaccinated. That is not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that I personally decide to make my own choice based on my own analyzation and risk assessment. So I've
Right.
decided that my age group has a very low chance of dying from this virus.
Right.
And based on that, like those numbers and the unknown of the vaccine, in my opinion, I've decided that I rather risk getting the virus than taking the vaccine and 50 years down the line figuring out something about that vaccine that was horrible.
Right.
And I think it's immoral for governments and things like that to force that on you. Because
Right.
imagine they force everybody to get vaccinated. 95% of the population is vaccinated. 20 years from now, it turns people into zombies, right? And it's like, oops, the government messed up. Now 95% of the population are zombies.
Right.
Obviously I'm exaggerating.
Or cancers or liver disease or heart problems,
Yeah,
all these
yeah,
things can
whatever it
happen.
may be.
So let me play the other side of it. So let's think real quick. So let's say this wasn't COVID-19, which has an overall death rate of a 0.5%. Never mind that we have the vaccines, which has brought it down extremely low, below flu deaths as of right now. Let's say this was the Spanish flu of what was it 1918. So let's go back 100 years. That had a death rate for people in our age group, 20 to 40, of 20%. Would you find that then? Would you get a vaccine for that?
Yeah, so again, it's a personal risk assessment, but
Right,
I obviously would do it. I'd say, hey,
right,
20% is a lot.
right.
So I don't, this vaccine has been
2 out of every
tested.
10,
Exactly. So
one in
this
five.
this vaccine is tested. It's safe based on the numbers that it's shown now. Maybe it has some repercussions down the line, but I'd rather risk those repercussions down the line than the 20% of dying now. You know?
Right.
And
And at
also,
that point, there's no need for a government to force you because you've done your own risk assessment.
exactly. Again, I don't think that the government should force you. If you decide for
Right,
yourself, like, hey, I'd rather risk the 20% than the
right.
vaccine, then that's on you. And I think you
Right.
should
And if
have the freedom to
I
do that.
found myself in that same situation, I probably would get the vaccine if it was a 20% mortality rate for my age range. If that was
Exactly.
me, I had a 1 in 5 chance of dying, I would get it. But I wouldn't be upset if you didn't get it because that would be on you. I'd be protected. I'd be safe. I would probably tell you, hey, bro, I think you should get this vaccine. But I wouldn't demand it of you because that would be on you not getting it. If I have it, then honestly, why do I care? Like, I hope you live a long, healthy life. But if you don't want it, I can't force that to you, and
Yeah.
you're not affecting me because I would be safe because I had the vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. I think one way that I would argue for the side of forcing people to get it is if forcing people to if not having it affected other people. So if you not having the vaccine affected someone else who wasn't able to get it. So for example, let's say um only only the vaccine only works on men.
Well,
Let's just pretend.
let's take an actual for instance, cancer patients, people who have cancer, they can't take the vaccine because that will heighten their risk because they already have a very low immunity system. That could give them a very bad reaction to the vaccine because the
Yeah.
vaccine is essentially COVID-19. Like when you get a
Some cases
vaccine,
in
you're literally getting the disease put in you, but it's a smaller amount. And the hope is that you would develop antibodies and it would kill it off, and you would basically be immune just as much as I would actually be catching a
which,
disease.
which, by the
That's
way,
that's
that what you just mentioned right there is the way one of the vaccines work, which has an 80%. But the other vaccine, it actually works a little bit smarter, in which it's not the virus, it's something disguised as the virus, but it's not actually the virus, and then
oh
your body
really?
learns to fight it. Yeah, it's a much more effective technique. Um, so it's a lot safer as well. So again,
Right,
I'm not saying that the vaccine is unsafe and that you shouldn't get it. I think it's a personal risk assessment. The government shouldn't force you to get it. That's where I'm coming from. And the reason
right,
I wanted to use the men versus female example, it's because it's half. It's a much bigger thing. So pretend
right,
that only men were able to be vaccinated and women were not, or the other way around. It doesn't matter. But the point is only half the people were eligible for vaccination. And the other half were at risk if this half didn't get it. So women are at risk of dying from COVID-19 if men aren't vaccinated. Then I would say, okay, maybe the government, because it's a public health issue, should have the emergency power to be able to do that, to force that, because it's a risk assessment that the government needs to make for protection of people that don't have the means of getting it. Then I'd agree.
right,
But in this case, you have the ability to protect yourself if you wanted to. And me being vaccinated or not should not affect you at all. So why would you force me to be vaccinated if you're protected yourself or if you have the
right,
ability to be protected? So that's why I just think it's extremely immoral. Like
right,
come years down the line, you force everybody to get the vaccine, and what if we discover that it gave you the instructions to fight off the vaccine, but it also gave you instructions to develop cancer or something? Who knows? And then it's
right,
like now 95% of the world has cancer because the government forced you to get the vaccine. And again,
right.
I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying it's not moral for the government to force you, and that being the biggest reason, and then the second reason because it takes away your freedom of choice.
Right.
That's where I'm coming at it from.
Right. And I love that you say freedom of choice because we have to look at history. We have to look at societies in the realm of history. Humanity has always done better when they had more freedom. Obviously, when there's been freedom, we haven't always used it perfectly. There's a lot of bad things that have happened under free societies. There is a lot more things that have happened even more horribly under totalitarian societies. And we have to understand that when we start to demand and make mandates, we are starting to encroach into totalitarian society thinking. And it always starts off, there's nobody that ever was the head of a totalitarian society who didn't think they were doing a good thing.
Yeah,
Hitler, in his own mind, really believed he was doing what was best.
yeah,
He really believed he was doing the world a service. And I'm not saying that everyone who wants the vaccine is the equivalent of Hitler and wants to demand
yeah.
vaccines. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you're opening up that door, and the door of totalitarianism leads to the Holocaust. And I'm saying that that's something that we as a society have to be aware of.
Yeah, and I think that's great because I think that the people at Pod Save America, they think they're doing the right thing and they think that their
Sure.
policies in their mind are correct, just like we think that ours are correct, right? But that's one thing that they mentioned. They're like, oh, these other countries are doing so well because I mean, aside from like India and things like that, but they're doing so well because they're not so caught up in stupid politics and having your freedoms and things like that. And it's like I think that's significantly more important than a half of a half of a half of a percent, you know.
Right.
So that's, I mean, not only is that my opinion, but that's just the way that my morality sways. I think the reason I think we did this podcast so impromptu is because I think it's an issue of morality now, and I think it's a big
Right.
deal. I saw another video today saying that a a tax collector's office in Orlando is forcing workers to get the vaccine, or they'll be forced to resign. That's getting serious. In Orlando,
Right.
this is a place where Governor DeSantis said that any private business that asks um, customers for proof of vaccination is going to be fined $5,000.
Right.
Now, a state like a public entity is forcing their employees to have the vaccine, or else they'll have to resign. Now, it's getting serious now. Like you're
Right.
going to be out of a job unless you do this, which you personally made the risk assessment and you don't think you should, right?
Right.
And you're not putting anybody at risk by not getting the vaccine except yourself and other people who have also decided not to get the vaccine. So
Right.
I think places that are forcing vaccination on people, like France, are not doing well. Like we see all these protests and riots going on in France now, and if you're
Right,
not aware, you can look it up. But they're rioting in the streets
right.
because I think President Macron or something is forcing, or I don't know how you pronounce that.
Emmanuel Macron. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, he's forcing people to get vaccinations. So
right.
I definitely don't think we should do that here, and I think President Biden has been smart enough to not do that himself. And I
Well,
think
he
that's
also
one of
has the checks and balances of the states' rights, so he can't really.
yeah,
He
and
doesn't have a
well, I think that's one
constitutional
of the
authority to really do that.
yeah, I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, he could like pass executive legislation, which I don't think would be a good idea, and I think that his cabinet is probably advising him not to do something like that. Just so I think that's a good call.
Right,
And I hope it stays that way because otherwise we might see some very serious things happening here as well. But
right,
anyone watching that thinks that hey, the vaccine is the best thing in the world and everyone should get it, I encourage you to like hey, continue to think that, but just don't think of forcing your belief on someone else because I
right.
don't want you to not get the vaccine. I'm not going to force you to not get it, but you shouldn't force me to get it.
Right. And
Especially
I,
if
and I
it's
think that everybody that also thinks that way understand at the end of every government law is a gun. And what I mean by that is, let me just say, well, if I don't pay my taxes, what's going to happen? The IRS is going to come, and eventually they're going to confiscate everything that I have. And if I refuse to give up my house and refuse to say, no, I'm not going to jail, and I just continue to say, no, 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 eventually, they're going to try to take me to prison if I say no to that and I resist. To enough point, I will be killed.
hmm
And that's the point. At the end of every government law is a gun. And so if you're demanding vaccines be put into people, I mean, I guess you could physically force somebody to have it injected into them. That being said, that's a very totalitarian mindset.
yeah,
That is a power that now the government has. And when the government has power, it's very, very, very difficult to get that power to give back
yeah,
to us. And then it's just a matter of time before that power is turned on you and it's something that you don't like. The
yeah, yeah,
totalitarian power is fine as long as you're on the side that agrees with the totalitarian
exactly.
agenda. But the point is that that power one day will be turned on you. And that's something that we have to think about as a free and decent society. Do you actually want the government to have that type of power?
Yeah. Anytime you find yourself thinking, hey, everybody should be forced to do this, anytime you find yourself thinking that, you really need to reevaluate because think of it the other way around. Think about if those people were saying that you should be forced to do X and Y and Z, right? Freedom is always more important. As long as it's not putting anyone else in danger or destroying anybody else's life or anything like that, you should have the freedom to decide, regardless of whether or not you agree or like the outcome. So I
Right.
think that's the most important message you're trying to get out here, and how this applies to the vaccination. So I think that's all I got to say. I was hoping we could keep it a
Yeah.
little bit shorter, but we did give that
Right.
introduction, and we hope we can do these more often. Maybe
Absolutely.
maybe it'll be responses to podcasts like Pod Save America or other podcasts whenever we
Right.
feel like there's something really important to talk about or current news or anything like that. So
Right, right. No, I think this is great. And if you have anything that you have for us, anybody who's listening out there, please drop us a DM. We can do a shorter little show like this. Maybe we'll have you on a longer form
yeah,
show at some other point. But we want you involved. We appreciate everybody who does listen. So we thank you. And I will just sign off now. This is the Doug and Fur Show.
signing off.